Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good morning, or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Research Your Toolkit, the State of Public Participation. It's just an extreme pleasure to be able to welcome you all today on behalf of IAP2 Canada and IAP2 USA. My name is Amelia Shaw, and I will be your moderator for today. But before we get going with the event, we're going to ask Drew to just step in and provide some housekeeping items on how we're going to be running today's webinar. So I'm just turn this over to Drew.
All right, thanks, Amelia. Welcome, everybody. We've got, as Amelia says, a few housekeeping things. We've got three presenters who are going to be talking to us about their research, and it is possible for you to ask questions for us. We're going to keep everybody's microphones muted, and if you've muted your microphone, please unmute it now and let us do the muting on this end. We keep everybody muted because otherwise you get serious feedback going down the line, and that can be very distracting. But when you do have a question or a comment, you can do one of two things. You can fire it to us in the question box that you have here, and we can read it off to our presenters, or you can see a little yellow hand icon. Maybe it's not yellow there, but there's a hand-shaped icon. Click on that, and that will make it pop up on our screen here indicating that you've got a question. You put up your hand, and Amelia will come to you to answer that. This is being recorded, so we will have this available to you within 48 hours of this so that you can use it for professional development purposes, and we'll also try to arrange to have any PowerPoint decks, if they're available, put up there as well. Throughout this, we'll also be running a couple of poll questions, so watch for that. There's some questions related to what our presenters are going to be asking us, and so feel free to enter into those polls. They've also got some open-ended questions they're going to be asking, and also if you want to respond to that verbally, put up your hand, or if you want to respond to it through the question box, you can do it that way as well. We'll also be using those questions in a survey that will be circulating to you after the webinar has closed. So watch for those. These are some questions that may need a bit of consideration for you, so feel free to respond to those later as part of the feedback we get from this. So that is basically it from this end. As I say, if you've got questions, we will switch your microphone on at that time and then mute it once again when your question has been asked. And feel free to put up your hand any time if you've got something you need to ask us about, or again, use the question box. So with all that, I'm going to toss this over to Amelia to get this party going. Amelia.
Thanks very much, Drew. And I will just get you to switch to the next slide so we can see beautiful pictures of our presenters. And with that, I'm going to introduce our first presenter, who is Maria de Bruin. Maria's commitment to investing in healthy communities started in her youth and has continued in all avenues of her career and education. Maria is a member of the IAP2 Canada Board of Directors. She is the primary architect of and instructor for the University of Alberta's graduate course in engagement in the digital age, and she writes and teaches for the university's management school. She is also the founder of Emerge Solutions Incorporated, a consultancy that partners with municipal and not-for-profit organizations seeking better ways to engage with and make decisions in concert with their colleagues and the public. Before founding Emerge Solutions in 2010, Maria has spent 10 years leading communications, engagement, and organizational planning in the public sector. She also completed her Master of Arts in Communications and Technologies with a capstone research project focused on digital engagement in the public sector. So with that, Maria, we're going to hand the mic over to you and listen to your presentation. So you now have the ability for your slides to be shown.
Great, thank you, Amelia. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, thank you for taking the time to be a part of today's webinar. Our group is extremely excited about the initiative that we've been working on for the past year and are in the area where we're ready to share some of our key findings and our proposed next steps. So today you're going to be joined by myself and a couple of other colleagues that worked on this project and share some of our findings and information related to research. This was an IAP2 Canada initiative, but we are excited with some of the findings as we believe that it will lead to just IAP2 Canada, but also internationally. So today we're going to take you through a little bit about why IAP2 Canada looked to explore the incorporation of research into their services and how the committee decided to examine that issue. Fittingly, we did use a research approach, given that it was a research project. We also want to share with you what we learned from that research, and there were three main aspects for us to gather our data. One was a member survey for IAP2 Canada members. Another was an environmental scan, and we also used a survey that went beyond our membership, and we've called that the State of Public Participation in Canada. We'll also take some time near the end to tell you what we believe to be the next steps for IAP2 Canada moving forward with research, and then we will give you an opportunity to share some of your thoughts. So I will proceed. Over the past couple of years, as I mentioned, IAP2 Canada has been observing and listening to comments from practitioners about research, and there's been a growing desire to integrate evidence-based practice into public participation work, not only a theme in Canada, but something that has been heard through IAP2 Federation affiliates, and there are some that are also exploring this. When IAP2 Canada conducted their member engagement process in 2011, they heard this desire for integrating research again. And the organization gave it a place in its strategic plan under the direction of ways to advance the practice of public participation. In that 2011 member engagement process, research was described in three ways. First, sharing information on trends, best practices, and innovation. Secondly, providing access to national and international public participation, peer-reviewed journals, special publications, and research-related events. And then sponsoring and conducting its own research and studies in partnerships with organizations and with institutions. So we at IAP2 Canada, the board, decided to strike a committee to examine this issue a bit further. And we had 8 dedicated members from across Canada participate. We had representation from BC, Great Lakes, the New St. Lawrence chapter, Wild Rose. We also worked with other IAP2 Canada committees, including the Outreach and Collaboration Committee, had communications with them, as well as the IAP2 Federation. So this was the team of people that came together. They put many, many hours into scoping out the research initiative for IAP2 Canada, including development of the process that we would take, creating surveys, analyzing the data, making recommendations, and then authoring 3 primary reports that result from this project. And those reports will be found on the IAP2 Canada website in the members section. All of these individuals contributed valuable knowledge and insight throughout the process, and we're extremely committed to seeing this project right through. I'm happy to say that most of the individuals are also willing to continue working on the initiative going forward. And I'd like to take just a second to say thank you sincerely to all of them for their contributions. So our approach was 3-pronged. We wanted to come to a better understanding of what a research initiative would look like. We devised a methodology that applied qualitative and quantitative questions. These were primarily administered through surveys to gather member and non-member practitioner perceptions about where we are currently and the desired approach to research. This was also supplemented by conducting an environmental scan focused on both member-based organizations and organizations with initiative comparable to IAP2 both nationally and internationally. We began with a literature review and we took a look primarily at IAP2 Canada's resources, being an IAP2 Canada initiative. The committee reviewed several documents, including, but not limited to, the organization's strategic plan. Again, we went back to the engagement process of 2011. We also looked at the work plans for various IAP2 Canada committees, including outreach and collaboration, the strategic communications plan for the organization, and then we went into the IAP2 Federation website and its research network, along with consideration for IAP2 Canada's budget, because we needed to keep resources in mind as we went forward. The group used the information that came forth in this literature and document review to help us focus an environmental scan, and it provided a way for the committee to compare IAP2 Canada's current state to other systems in the context of the overall sector trends. The environmental scan focused on P2 sector resources. The committee began its review of over 100 websites based on an inventory of organizations provided by IAP2 Canada's Collaboration and Outreach Committee and some independent research. We were fortunate also to have the Centre for Public Involvement, which is based out of Edmonton, willing to share recent environmental scan data that they collected to help our efforts as well in this area. The committee also explored international organizations that may be considered potential partners in future IAP2 Canada research initiatives. This was a particularly interesting task. It revealed collaborative, outward-thinking, creative research practices that we might not necessarily have been aware of. However, a scan of these potential partners on an international scale is quite a large task. With that in mind, the information that will be presented in the environmental scan is considered preliminary research. The objective of that international portion was to provide enough information to enable us to reflect on future directions at an international scale. So the information collected as part of the literature review and the environmental scan went back to the committee and then were reviewed again in context of IAP2 Canada's strategic plan, the 2011 member engagement. We looked at it through the lens of IAP2 Federation, our IAP2 Canada committees, and the budget. And this helped to identify some symmetries and some tensions that were present between IAP2 Canada's current state and then the trends taking place in public participation research nationally and internationally. Finally, we did conduct a situational analysis and using surveys to seek input from a broader cross-section of practitioners. Our objective was to gather facts and experiences and perspectives. The member survey portion was focused on the value and operational aspects of research and a desired future for IAP2 Canada research. The State of the Practice survey expanded that view, and it was focused on tools, techniques, and best practices that are commonly employed in public participation. More importantly, that questionnaire attempted to provide a better understanding of the perceived value and effectiveness of P2 in the context of the process as well as its outcomes. Additionally, barriers and limitations were also investigated to ultimately drive the generation of a list of research needs. With respect to analyzing the data for trends and developing recommendations for a research initiative that would enhance IAP2 Canada, the committee sought out alignment between practices in the sector and IAP2's ideas and expectations of a desired research initiative. So now that you have a bit of the background, I'm going to share with you some of the findings from the member survey, and then I'll be turning it over to Sherry and Sharif, who will share with you findings from the environmental scan and the State of the Practice survey that was conducted. So from the member survey perspective, this survey was issued online beginning of last year, and in total we received 118 responses. It was a good response rate. At the time we had approximately 467 active IAP2 Canada members, so 25% rate was we were happy with. Currently our membership is somewhere around 570. And overall the respondents share that they value research, they find it relevant to their public participation work, and for us that indicated a desire to determine the best way to integrate public participation research into our current work to meet our membership needs. So analysis of that member survey data raised 4 primary opportunities for IAP2 Canada. The first was around building capacity and sharing knowledge. We found that most respondents did not belong to or have any access to an organization with research-related association. So this gap creates an opportunity for IAP2 to be a conduit for its memberships, for its members to gain access to P2 research. Given that the majority of respondents don't actively source research, accessibility is one area that the association can support member research needs. And the primary recommended mechanism for that was an online database or resource library. An overwhelming number of respondents indicated an interest in research-based trends, best practices, and innovations in P2. And this input provides guidance on the type of resources the membership will find useful. There is a strong desire to stay away from dense academic research. The membership indicated a need for condensed and easy, palatable research findings tailored to practitioner needs. The second theme was around collaboration, partnership, and networking. The survey brought forward rich information for us on the potential of partnering or sponsoring organizations that are conducting research. Some work is needed to assess the viability, however, and our environmental scan was designed to be a jumping off point for that. IAP2 Canada, for IAP2 Canada, it was also found that development of partnerships needs to align with the work that some of our committees are doing, specifically our Outreach and Collaboration Committee. As part of their mandate is to connect and build partnerships. So additionally, it was found that consideration should be given to how these research partners align overall with IAP2 services in order to maximize the collaborative opportunities. Along the lines of networking, there is an opportunity available through the research initiative to satisfy another gap that was identified by the membership, and that was developing connections with organizations and practitioners based on research. There is potential for aligning the dissemination of research, so getting research out to our membership with face-to-face initiatives such as regional chapter functions or IAP2 Canada or North American Conference, and that would fulfill one of the needs that we heard from the respondents, which was their ability to be able to participate in things such as research-based roundtables or workshops. The third theme was around advancing the practice. Several potential research topics were identified here, and we can use that information, and we did use that information as comparative data with the external State of Public Participation Practice survey that Sharif will speak to shortly. In the member survey, respondents were identified research on evaluation as their primary need. Academic institutions were also recognized as the logical partners for any research collaborations. And there still, again, was that concern over purely academic resources being provided to the memberships. Respondents are clearly seeking resources that translate theory into evidence-based concepts to further the practice. So this will require some further exploration as to how best to bridge that theory and practice so it does provide value to the membership. Finally, we were curious about what the perceptions were around the risks and challenges of undertaking a research initiative for the organization, and the membership honed in on a number of them. The availability of IAP2 resources to implement research and ensuring rigor and ethical guidelines and data collection were amongst the top concerns. Again, bridging that academic priority with what practitioners actually need was surfaced as well. It was also noted that sharing or disseminating research in a way that's meaningful and accessible could put a strain on the organization, as it would require additional resources.
So Maria, I'm just going to jump in because there's a couple of questions that we have here.
Sure.
Okay. So Larry's asking, could you provide some more specific examples of what respondents wanted research to cover? Not sure that I got it, although you may have already said it. So very specifically, some examples or some topics.
I would say the top two were evaluation, and that followed by conflict management. And when Sharif speaks, he will have be able to provide you the actual specific list that came up that we were able to correlate back.
And a question from Martin. I wanted to know, was there any thought on cross-cultural engagement in first languages? Also, any idea of developing a process for grounded theory? New ones not in evidence yet.
Oh, very good questions. We haven't gotten that far yet, would be my answer. I think on the grounded theory part, that is part of what we will have to explore moving forward, as this was primarily to get us our foundation and getting into the specifics of how we would tackle research is still to be decided, although we do have some recommendations that we will act upon. And as far as cross-culture, we didn't explore that, but again, we are looking for ideas, and we'll use that type of feedback as we move forward. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks, Maria. And just a quick reminder to everybody, if you have questions, don't hesitate to send them in the questions box. And as you can see, we will interrupt the presenters and make sure the questions are heard. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Okay. So we've taken a look at our approach and explored some of the findings from the survey that we did with our membership from IAP2 Canada. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sherry, who will, actually I'll turn over to Amelia, who will introduce Sherry, who will talk about our environmental scan portion.
Thanks so very much, Maria. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Sherry Campbell. Sherry has over 15 years experience as a Director of Change Management, Communications and Public Stakeholder Engagement Programs. Her experience includes leading government and Crown agencies through large-scale change and designing communications and stakeholder consultation approaches. Sherry's current area of specialization is labour market development in Canada, and her projects include collaborative initiatives with government to achieve integrated cross-ministry and cross-jurisdictional objectives for transformation of programs to realize high-stakes efficiencies in international and domestic labour market recruitment and development. In addition, an initiative with a BC Crown agency will generate innovative design of pricing structures through citizen and key stakeholder engagement. Dr. Campbell holds degrees in psychology, public administration, organizational development, and leadership. She is a requested speaker on topics of implementing and managing the impact of change and developing strategies for public stakeholder engagement. Sherry, over to you.
Thank you. Let's see, I have my screen now. There we are. Hello everyone, my name is Sherry, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of two other committee members as well, Lindsay Wigington and Suzanne Waldman. The three of us worked on the environmental scan. I would like to acknowledge the work of board members Maria De Bruin and Sharif Kanawi, who you will hear from shortly, who have worked with the IAP2 board to develop surveys regarding the research initiative targeting IAP2 Canada members and also an external audience of P2 practitioners who are not members currently of IAP2 Canada. Through their member needs assessment and state of P2 practice examination, they have gained valuable information on future research topics. The environmental scan builds upon the surveys with an assessment of current IAP2 related research across Canada and internationally so that we may understand current approaches to research and the focus of research activities. Organizations across Canada and international organizations were scanned, and an inventory was prepared based on web search and input by the IAP2 Collaboration and Outreach Committee and the Centre for Public Involvement based in Edmonton. The research subcommittee reviewed the current research initiatives of IAP2 Canada member organizations and affiliate organizations. IAP2 membership represents a broad spectrum of fields and specialties, and member organizations often work with public policy to make decisions or implement programs. Other member organizations tend to provide a forum for discussion and research and public reports on best practices and trends in the public participation field. And to define these two terms, like initiatives includes organizations that have a similar mandate and practices with IAP2 Canada and IAP2 organizations, whereas member organizations is defined as including organizations with employees, students, or faculty that are IAP2 Canada members through group or individual membership. And we have our first poll here for you, and the question is, how familiar are you with IAP2 research initiatives in Canada and in other countries? Okay. Is our poll ready, Drew?
Yep, the poll is up there and we're just waiting for people to respond.
Great.
So we'll give people just a few more seconds to respond and then we'll shut it down and then people can see how they've responded. So we'll shut it down in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Drew, if you can close the poll so we can see the results.
I can hardly wait.
So we're still waiting to see the results, Drew?
Guess so.
So we're still looking for the results, so just hang tight just a second, Sherry. We did close the poll, but they haven't automatically come up on the screen.
All right, I'll wait.
We're done, but
what I can do is read you the results right now. 44% not aware at all. 37% say they've heard something about them. 19% somewhat familiar, and 0 saying very familiar.
Oh, well, then what we're doing right now is very important because certainly we are examining research initiatives across Canada and other countries, and we hope to be able to share then the information with you so that you can become more aware of IAP2 research initiatives that are happening currently across our country and internationally. And I realize that we also have some of our U.S. cousins here on the line, so I'll be referring to some of the organizations shortly. So I'm ready now to move on, and do I have control, Ian? Yes, I do. All right. So to assess and compare our P2 research organizations, we developed a set of evaluation criteria, and when I say we, I refer to myself and my other 2 committee members. We decided that the initial question really needed to be whether the organization is active and fully functioning, and specifically whether the organization is active in research rather than simply acting as a repository for the collection of research, which we found in some cases. If the answer was no to the question of active research, then we didn't pursue further analysis. If yes, then the next 2 criteria were used to evaluate the strength of the IAP2 related research organization for partnership. So the second criteria included the scope and type of public participation and engagement research. We asked, is the organization focused on P2 processes? Is the research applicable to practice? Does the organization go beyond the collection of social policy and data? And if so, what is the level of analysis? Does the organization conduct research regularly? And if so, what is the level of activity? The third criteria, finally, the capacity to collaborate, included questions such as, is the organization currently in a collaborative relationship with similar organizations or other relevant organizations such as public institutions? And has the organization been active with research in the past? And further, what is the depth of this research activity? Our results, well, part of our environmental scan was not only to take a look at the research that's being practiced across Canada and internationally with regard to P2, our outcome or our goal was to look at potential IAP2 research partnerships. And based on a total group of 106 identified IAP2 related research organizations, after our evaluation process, 20 were identified as potential research partners. This included in the U.S. the Kettering Foundation, the Deliberative Democracy Consortium, or DDA, and the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation. All 3 are current partners also with IAP2 Canada. The potential Western Canada partners, the first 2 are located in Alberta, and the next 4 are in BC. Alberta Climate Change Dialogue conducts research and publishes a series of working papers on stakeholder and citizen roles and public deliberation. CPI advances research and learning in the area of public involvement with the objective of enhanced decision-making at all levels. It publishes various works and projects on citizen planning, community sustainability, and internet voting topics. Spark BC is a nonpartisan charitable organization that focuses on social justice issues and working with communities. It has extensive experience and research on various social issues and topics, and not to be confused with Spark is SCARP. UBC SCARP promotes excellence in integrated policy and planning research, professional education, and community service. It has more than 5 decades of experience with planning, education, and research, including community development and social planning, multimedia tools, improving public engagement, and multidisciplinary research, as well as capacity building programs. UVic Institute of University Engagement provides a space for the study and practice of engagement scholarship and interdisciplinary innovation. It is a new initiative providing services through the research partnerships and KM unit with directly related research on public engagement, public policy development, and improved theory and practice. And finally, the SFU WASC Center uses dialogue to generate nonpartisan and constructive communication around difficult partners. It also partners with government, business, and community groups to explore these critical issues and conduct research on the impact of social, economic, environmental, and cultural well-being of our communities. Eastern Canada potential partners. The first 3 are located in Montreal, as well as numbers 6 and 7. McMaster and Tamarack are located in Ontario. INM is a nonpartisan organization, that's the Institut de Nouveau, is a nonpartisan organization with the mission to encourage citizen participation and to generate new ideas in Quebec. The Living Lab is modeled after MIT Living Labs and is a center of innovation and public participation. McGill U faculty and students are actively engaged in a variety of research endeavors focused on urban planning and public participation. McMaster U in Hamilton, Ontario, under Dr. Julia Abelson, conducts research in the design and evaluation of public participation processes to inform health system decision-making. Tamarack in Waterloo, Ontario, develops learning communities of collaboration to co-generate knowledge that solves complex community challenges like poverty. U of Montreal faculty and students are actively engaged in a variety of research focused on public participation, including the professionalism of public participation under Professor Lawrence Baer. And U of Quebec faculty and students are actively engaged in a variety of directly related research under Professor Mario Gauthier on public participation and development issues in Quebec. Potential research partnerships Canada-wide include CBSR, a rich resource for leading research and reports on a wide variety of topics with a mission to accelerate and scale corporate social environmental sustainability. C2D2 is probably likely well known to all people on this webinar. It's a community of individuals and organizations dedicated to the creation and sustainability of vibrant communities, businesses, governments, not-for-profits, and learning institutions. It's focused on generating insight, knowledge, and connecting practitioners, organizations, and researchers.
So Sherry, before you go on, you've had a number of open-ended questions that you've included in your PowerPoint presentation, and it's just a reminder to people that they can put up their hand and we can acknowledge them and they can respond to some of your open-ended questions, or they can send something via the question as well, because I know that you really are hoping for feedback from the participants on the call at this point in time. So I don't have anything for you yet. Oh, I do. Larry's just raised his hand, so I'm going to open up Larry's mic so he can ask you a question directly. So hang on a second.
Terrific. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
We
I can.
Hey, good to talk to you. Thank you for this presentation. I guess I'm just a little bit unsure of kind of the United States participants' role here. I mean, I know you all were obviously focusing on Canada and you're asking about Canada, but you know, this webinar was you know, made available to us here in the U.S., and so I'm not sure whether to suggest other organizations stateside or not, or kind of how to contribute something from the U.S. side, because I certainly am not aware that much of Canadian organizations other than the ones you've mentioned, but there certainly are a lot of groups doing like-minded work here, but I just wasn't sure whether that was in the scope or not.
Yes, actually, that is the current open-ended question. What other IAP2 related research organizations do you feel IAP2 Canada should consider for partnership? And unfortunately, we're not at the next slide, which lists all of the predominantly U.S. Potential IAP2 research partnerships that we examined. But while I have you on the call,
in other words,
yeah.
when you say, do you feel IAP2 Canada should consider for partnership, are you saying
Yes.
that IAP2 Canada would consider U.S. partners?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, certainly, I mean, the Strauss Institute for Civic Life at the University of Texas, where I'm, which is right near where I work and where I have some affiliation, is a organization I think you all should take a close look at. And I think that there's some sort of a network that might be organized by the National Policy Consensus Center up in Portland, Oregon, I believe. There are probably some Portland people on the call that could correct me on that, but I remember seeing kind of a list of organizations that are either university-based or something like it, doing this sort of work and with a research, potentially a research component. But again, the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life at the University of Texas is a sure research organization that I think would be worth considering, particularly in terms of the intercultural components, because UT, given its placement in Texas, is there's a Center for Latin American Studies here, and quite an emphasis on understanding multiculturalism just based on our geography. So that could be of some value to IAP2.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Your input's very much appreciated, and if there are others who have input on this question, it seems like it's open mic versus a poll question.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Sherry. And yes, absolutely, Larry. I think from what I've heard in speaking to Maria, Sherry, and Sharif, they're very interested in what's happening in North America and potentially even around the world if you've got recommendations or suggestions. But we do have another recommendation from Catherine. She's suggesting that UNBC is conducting community-based research on improving citizen engagement in oil and gas development, and that might be something for you to take a look at with UNBC. So if anybody else on the line has any recommendations or suggestions, just raise your hand or send me a question. But at the moment, we don't have anything more, so back to you, Sherry.
Okay. Perhaps by the end, when we have an open-ended question, there'll be more. All right. So the potential international IAP2 research partnerships that we narrowed it down to, the top 6 at this point, are 1, 2, and 3 are based in the U.S. and are current partners with IAP2 Canada. There's also Stanford University and the Center for Deliberative Democracy identified as a potential U.S. partner. So the Kettering Foundation is rooted in cooperative research and primary research focused on ways to make democracy work with citizens, communities, and institutions. Research is conducted from the perspective of citizens and focuses on what people can do collectively to address problems. DDC is an association of leading scholars and organizations that seek to promote the emerging movement to institutionalize public involvement processes. The consortium aims to share information, build knowledge through research, and promote a strong citizen voice in government decisions. Then the DDC has embarked on some ambitious research to build knowledge around the actual impact of deliberation upon civic attitudes and behavior and the sustainability of follow-on efforts. The NCDD is a community of individuals and organizations dedicated to the creation and sustainability of vibrant communities, businesses, governments, not-for-profits, and learning institutions. And there's directly related research that involves the public engagement, and it also publishes, publishes the Public Engagement Resource Guide. Citizen DRC is located in the UK and conducts global research and assembles a research consortium to investigate how citizens and how institutions are accountable to citizens. They support long-term research with the objective of generating new knowledge and disseminating it widely to decision makers and practitioners. Since 2011, Citizenship DRC has built a network of researchers, policymakers, practitioners, and activists, and has collected more than 150 empirically grounded case studies to examine how citizen action and participation shape states and societies. LogoLink is located in Portugal, Europe, promoting dialogue, exchange, and learning about participatory local governance initiatives from field-based innovations and expressions of democracy, which contribute to social justice. They're also interested in strengthening relationships between those who govern and those who are governed, and toward the needs and concerns of citizens so that citizens and civil society organizations are better prepared to actively engage. And Stanford University, the Center for Deliberative Democracy, devotes itself to research about democracy and public opinion, obtained through deliberative polling, combining deliberation and small group discussions with random sampling to provide public consultation for public policy and for electoral issues.
So Sherry, just a couple of other ideas have come across. Pennsylvania State with John Gastel, and also so a few more recommendations from our participants out here.
Sorry, could you please repeat that last one? It just cut out briefly.
Kansas State?
Yes, and was there a name attached with that?
No.
Or just Kansas State? Okay.
Kansas State, I think, yeah.
Terrific, thank you. And for our last question here, I imagine we can make this open mic, it might be easier. Do you have any questions? Any other considerations that, any other potential research partnerships that we should be considering? Anything else from the group?
So I'm not seeing anything from anybody at the moment, but that doesn't mean that something won't come up as we continue on.
Yes.
So Sherry, are you now passing it on to Sharif?
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sherry. So this is my opportunity to introduce Sharif Kanawi, who is currently completing his PhD in Construction Management and Management at the University of Toronto. His research interests include of urban engineering projects, integration of information technologies, and development of context-sensitive solutions to current sustainability challenges in developing countries. Sharif is currently investigating the role of electronic public participation in infrastructure projects, specifically exploring methods of formalizing the communication process within the context of sustainable infrastructure construction and social impacts. He also serves on several executive bodies, including the Executive Board of the International Association for Public Participation, Canada, the Great Lakes Chapter, and the Research Subcommittee. So Sharif, over to you.
Thank you, Amelia.
Thanks, Sharif. We can hear you.
Perfect. Let me just get to the next slide. So as Cherry and Maria mentioned, the survey was directed at P2 practitioners at large in Canada, beyond IAP2 membership. The survey had the following objectives. We wanted to bridge P2 research and practice, so public participation research and practice. We wanted to determine priority areas, identify the needs of practitioners, mainly to advise the IAP2 Canada board and also inform trainers on the needs of practitioners. Essentially, the survey was meant to shed some light on some patterns that would provide direction to the IAP2 Canada board, and more importantly, to inform trainers and researchers in the field. It should answer questions about important aspects that need to be addressed by current and future research and training. The IAP2 Canada Research Subcommittee issued the survey online in May of last year. As with the member survey, everyone was invited to participate through the IAP2 Canada newsletter and social media channels. They were given a period of 4 weeks to respond, and overall, as you can see, we had 86 responses. From these responses, we identified a number of focus areas. Conflict management was one that jumped out right away. and I believe it was mentioned by Maria earlier. Also, standards for effectiveness and evaluation, and defining successful processes and outcomes. The third one was social media, web-based, and mobile technologies. A lot of people wanted to know more about that. And finally, engaging top-level management and decision makers in effective public participation. To arrive at these focus areas, we had a certain structure for the survey. We offered it in English and French. About 10% of the responses were in French. And I'd like to take a second to thank fellow committee members, Catherine and Lindsay, whom Maria already mentioned, for their efforts in making it happen. I will be presenting some of the key findings in more detail, but first let me give you an idea about the organization of the survey. We had primarily 4 sections focusing on different areas. The first one was respondents' information. We wanted to find out who was being engaged through the survey, find out a bit more about them. The second one was effectiveness of the public participation process. This was really an opinion-based part where we asked about your opinions in terms of what you think about the P2 process. The third one was tools and techniques, finding out more about how it was implemented and your experiences. And finally, the barriers and limitations. Before we move into a deeper discussion of key findings, let me throw out a couple of questions. We'll come back to these questions later, but I just wanted to give you some time to think about them. I'd like to ask you what you think are some of the tools and techniques you have used on your last projects and what sorts of challenges you've met while trying to implement them. I know that some of you may be students or may not have started on working on your projects, or maybe joining us from other locations within North America or beyond, and your experiences would definitely be valuable to us. For the first section of respondents, a large number of respondents identified Alberta and Ontario, 40% each, as the region of operation. All Canadian provinces and territories were represented. Some of the respondents also indicated that they operated beyond the border on international projects in other countries, so like the United States, for example, and some European countries. The results also show that 80% of respondents selected the public sector as their primary sector, while almost a quarter selected the private sector, and about 23% as well selected the not-for-profit sector. Again, we're acknowledging here that many of us as professionals in the P2 industry operate in more than one role and more than one sector, and the questions allowed for that, so respondents were able to select more than one sector or role. Finally, we also asked about project types, and as you can see, policy, land use planning, community development, and energy projects showed the highest involvement, with about 30 to 50% for each of them. For the second section, which asked about the effectiveness of the process, we asked survey participants to indicate their level of agreement with a number of preset statements, as well as their use of common process goals. A very large proportion of respondents, almost 96%, agreed to some extent that the process brings value to other processes that encompass it, for example, like environmental assessments. Followed by that, 90% agreed that the benefits of the process outweigh its costs. And then the proportion of agreement was relatively lower for the other 3 questions about social web tools in terms of the tools increasing the effectiveness of the P2 process. So essentially, some people thought that using social web tools, which are quite popular now, does not, you can't take it for granted. They do not necessarily increase the effectiveness of the P2 process. Finally, there was a majority of disagreement on the lack of effect of public feedback on the outcome of the project. In that case, 23% were in agreement with that statement and 62% were in disagreement. When asked about the purposes for which public feedback was used, most participants indicated that they most often, or sometimes, used P2 to satisfy regulation requirements. extracting local knowledge, and understanding issues and concerns, or even enhancing support for a project. When it came to delegation of decision making, that was the least cited purpose. We're about to move into the next section, tools and techniques, and I have a question for you. Whether you work or study in Canada or other locations in North America, we'd like to hear from you. You can raise your hand or comment. I will take a few answers. The question is, we have a number of purposes listed here on this slide for conducting public participation. What other purposes can you think of than those listed? So we'll take a few seconds to take a few answers if you have any.
So you do have a comment. It's amazing that most think it's least used for driving policymaking and more used for an support or extracting local knowledge. And I think that's really just a comment. It's maybe not so much amazing, certainly very interesting that it's not driving policy, but just being used for enhancing support or extracting local knowledge. So that was one of the comments that you've received, Sharif.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to see if anybody else has raised their hand or any other comments. You've got lots of people here listening, but I think they're just listening to everything that you have to share at the moment.
That's great, and I think I do agree with that last comment. Again, I mean, it's not that people do not think that it is used, so it is being used because we have that red bar indicates that a lot of people think that it's sometimes used, but it is interesting, I agree, just finding out how many people thought that enhancing support for a project or just generating solutions or maybe even extracting local knowledge would take a higher priority in that case. So just that ranking process was, the results were interesting for that.
Yeah.
I agree with that, definitely.
Thanks. So no other comments at the moment, Sharif,
great.
but
So
as
I'll
soon
just
as
move
they
on
come up.
and we
Thanks.
can take them at any time.
Excellent.
So moving on to our third section, tools and techniques. Again, some of these results may be interesting to a lot of us. The survey showed that a diversity of techniques are used by P2 professionals, notably open houses and town halls, public meetings, workshops, charrettes, reports, newsletters, direct mail letters. These are used most commonly. Many of the respondents pointed out that the choice of tool depends on the project. So this was something that was a bit difficult to ask in a survey because we all know that in terms of projects, we use different tools for different projects. But the survey did ask respondents to think about the last project they were working on just to try to standardize the set of answers that we got. Having said that, these were the results that we got out of that, and there was agreement on a lot of these tools and techniques. The survey
Sharif,
also showed, yes.
Sharif, perhaps before you move on, there's just a question about, do you think everyone had the same definition for town halls, the specificity on town halls? What do you think participants took that to mean? And the same is true for online material. Do you think that people might have approached this differently depending on the definitions?
The answer would be yes. I think that's the case in any survey. Usually the tools will be understood in different ways by different people. What we tried to use here was the definition that is used as a standard for IAP2 training, especially. So any training that's offered through IAP2 through one of the workshops, that is what we used. However, I would be in agreement with the fact that a lot of the respondents may, or at least some of them, may have had their own definitions depending on where they work and how they do it, how long they've been in the field, because even the definition of an open house has changed over the years. 20 years ago, it had a different meaning for a lot of people. So we are definitely conscious of that, we're aware of that, and we've tried to use as much of a variety of terms as we could, but within that, I agree that there may be variations.
Thanks, Sharif.
And again, so we got into someone asked about the online material, and the most commonly used tools in that case were online material, other web tools, facilitation, consensus building, and printed material. For tools and techniques, we also wanted to ask a bit more of a specific question about controversial projects. When someone thought they were approaching what they defined as a controversial project, what did they prefer to use in that case? And the answers indicated that in that case, site tours and field trips, round tables or word cafes, workshops or charrettes were the ones that were most preferred. And we also asked, what would you avoid? And in that case, the most avoided ones were deliberative polling, public meetings, which is interesting, and information centers. We also asked about the most favorite criteria for the selection of public participation tools. And in that case, it was those tools and techniques that facilitated participation, collaborative deliberation, so it facilitated the fact that participants could talk to each other and could come up with solutions together, and also whether they would provide accessibility. Moving on to barriers and limitations. The ones that were most commonly encountered were managing conflict, equity and representation, and engaging citizens beyond planning. So these were some of the ones that respondents thought were challenges that they encountered in trying to make it as what they thought a good process. One that was least commonly encountered, and that came as a surprise to me, but that was updating regulations to facilitate the use of web tools. For issues that you may have encountered, they probably all seem challenging, but please try to select the one that was most challenging from your experience. So I have this question for you, which is, which of these did you find most challenging in the past when using web and mobile tools? So let's listen a bit for what you have to say. And again, if you're a student or have not started on your project yet, perhaps you can let us know what you think is something that you would find challenging when it comes to implementing tools and techniques in public participation. So again, the question is, which of these issues did you find most challenging in the past when using web and mobile tools? If none of them were challenging, none of these 4 issues, you can say not challenging at all. So the 4 choices are: staff members were not properly trained, participants did not prefer web and mobile tools, presenting information electronically was a challenge, an overwhelming amount of feedback or difficulty in documenting official records. And
So
we'll have a
you.
look once we're done at what exactly came out of the survey.
Thanks, Sharif. We're going to close the poll in about 10 seconds. And just a quick reminder that we've just got about 5 to 7 minutes left in today's webinar, although we are capable of going beyond the hours. So if you could finish your response to the polls. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now let's look at the results. So Sharif, can you see these results?
I can't see them at this point.
Okay, so we'll read them to you. Staff members were not properly trained, was at 35%. Participants did not prefer web and mobile tools, was at 41%. Presenting information electronically was a challenge, was at 6%. Overwhelming amount of feedback and hard to document was 12%. And not challenging at all was 6%.
What was the percentage for the first one again?
35% staff
35%.
members were not properly trained.
So according to that, it seems like participants did not prefer the web and mobile tools. That was the one with the most, followed by staff members who were not properly trained. Let's have a quick look at what actually came out in the survey. So in that case, as you can see, it was mostly that we had a lot of respondents who indicated 44% that the increase in the amount of feedback or possibility of conflict were not relevant concerns. However, it seemed like the preferences of their participants and suitability of tools was the primary reason. And that's almost in agreement with what we see. So a lot of the tools that we select have to do with really what the participants would like to have, and that's a good thing. That's a good factor to have when trying to bridge communication. So thank you for your feedback, and it's good to see what came out of other places other than Canada as well in this context. Just to move on to finish off, What we've seen, again, is that there's generally an agreement on the value of P2. Open houses, public meetings, and workshops generally interact with the most common engagement techniques. And when it came to web tools, online materials and websites were the most tools used, whether that is web or non-web tools. And these choices, we have to keep that in mind. We're very much project dependent. So when we take this kind of data, we have to keep that in mind. With that, I will turn it over to Maria again. Thank you.
Thanks so very much, Sharif. And as I said, we're still welcoming any thoughts or comments to some of the open-ended questions that that have been thrown out over the course of today's presentation. But now we're going to hand it back to Maria. So Maria, over to you, please.
Thanks, Amelia, and thank you to Sherry and Sharif for their wonderful overviews. Our group is very passionate about the work that's been done, and I know we're short on time, but we wanted to share as much information as we could within the 60 minutes. So I'm going to go through this last portion relatively quickly, but I will emphasize the fact that the reports that came out of this work are available on the IAP2 Canada website. So if you're looking for more information and don't get the full grasp over the next few slides, all of that information is available online.
And sorry, just quickly, Maria, just to interrupt. This information will also be available on the IAP2 USA website through their webinar, where their members go to pick up their webinars. So if people are looking for a copy of this, it will also be available on the IAP2 USA website. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in and remind people of that as well. Sorry, Maria, back to you.
No, thank you, Amelia. Okay, so as we found, when we looked at the two surveys that were done, the environmental scan and the literature review, these were the key findings. And they all weave together very well. We know now that practitioners value public participation research and that they really want an opportunity to share and collaborate and bridge P2 theory and practice. This is no small undertaking, however. So because this work was initiated by IAP2 Canada, we had an obligation to go back to the board in that context. And so being that this is no small undertaking, while IAP2 Canada understands and validates the value of research, we have to acknowledge that there are tensions that exist here in adopting a research program or an initiative. The IAP2 organization emphasizes service and advocacy, and our mission speaks to having a quality impact on society, more specifically on communities, and we're preoccupied with identifying problems and creative solutions to advance the practice using results-focused, future-orientated approaches. So from IAP2 Canada's perspective, and I would assume perhaps from other Federation affiliates' perspective, the challenge in achieving these elements center on the fact that IAP2 Canada relies primarily on volunteer support, as do many of the affiliates, and for developing and implementing its services and its advocacy work. While it's natural for us to want to aim to enhance our services and the resources and skills, accessibility of those are important considerations when exploring our capacity to adopt a research initiative. So by comparing these findings to the IAP2 mission, values, and offerings of IAP2 Canada in particular, it became clear that the organization should exercise a phased approach to adopting a research program. And key considerations in the formation of such an initiative include desired outcomes, practitioner values, practitioner interests and expectations, and an assessment of our organizational resource. So all in all, we're looking at taking some baby steps to start forward. So our game plan. The focus of the research committee is on aligning the members and public participation practitioners' vision for research with the priorities and resources of IAP2 Canada. To accomplish this, the committee is recommending a meaningful structure that will support planning, quality control, and performance management so that we are accountable for the work and begin to cultivate the long-term elements that are desired by the members and P2 sector nationally and internationally. So we've centered on 3 goals. We believe that this is a manageable entrance into the realm of P2 research for the organization. And the first one is to provide IAP2 Canada members access to P2 research. And this is we're being considered in the context of the North American Conference, webinars such as this, working with the chapters. We also have a proposed partnership with NCDD that was mentioned earlier to look at online resource availability for research. Our second goal, the committee recommends adopting 2 mechanisms for connecting with research organizations. The first is to do a database of P2 researchers, and secondly to collaborate with our Canadian chapters to look at initiating a speakers forum that would feature P2 researchers. Our third goal is addressing that common theme throughout, which is bridging theory and practice, and that's through reviewing academic literature and identifying the common findings and gaps between research and practice. So moving forward, what you will see from IAP2 Canada over the next few months is that the research committee, we've got a few members that are continuing on with us, but we are looking for others to join our energized team. And we hope that those that are members of IAP2 Canada that are listening will be passionate about the topic as we are and hope to join our team. And we will prepare to implement that action plan in the next month here. So I will just do a quick plug for anybody that is interested in helping us build this research initiative. Start with our starting points of the action plan. The opportunity is posted on IAP2 Canada's website under volunteer opportunities. So in closing, I just want to say thank you to Sherry and Sharif. The 3 of us have provided you quite a bit of information. Those reports, as Amelia mentioned, will be available online. And just on behalf of the research committee, time permitting, I know we're a bit over, we would just like to know how you think this initiative will benefit you as a P2 practitioner. So if there's anybody that would like to share their perceptions or perspectives, we'd be happy to hear them. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maria, and also on behalf of everyone that have been participating in today's call and all of the people that will subsequently listen to this online, really a big shout out to both Sharif, Maria, and Sherry, and all of the various team members that have been supporting this initiative. It's really terrific that so much has been accomplished, and I think there's lots of opportunity to share this great work with IAP2 USA and other affiliates around the world. So I know that this work is greatly appreciated. I'm just checking to see one last time, guys, this is your opportunity to raise your hand or to send me a question. We have a question. I appreciate all this work. I hope that this initiative will help with developing evidence-based tools for frontline practitioners. We often don't have the time to collect the research on our own, and that comes from Trish. So maybe, Maria, did you want to respond to that? Sorry, Maria?
Sure. No, I appreciate that comment. Thank you, Trish, and I think our team is also feeling the same way. But as I said before, we have to approach this in a measured way because it was easy for us to get very excited about all of the opportunities that lay in front of us. But we will be taking, as I said, some baby steps forward, and with the intent to progress to that level of really being able to bridge the theory and practice and make it easy and palatable for practitioners to incorporate that into their work.
Thanks very much. And I'm also going to open up Larry. Larry, I can see you. And Larry, there we go. You've unmiked yourself. So Larry, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Amelia. I'm sorry to be, talking so much here, but I do want to commend the researchers and also sort of challenge them, because I think maybe this is more a function of my being in the U.S. than Canada. But I think in the U.S. we are, still quite a ways away from having P2 of the kind that IAP2 advocates for and teaches about, having that be sort of the norm. And I think that research that enables a municipality or a state agency to see the multiple returns on investment for the kind of P2 that we talk about, that kind of research is sorely needed. There's been some work done, I know, in Europe that a lot of us have seen. But I think one of the challenges in the U.S. is there's so little regulation that stimulates governments to pursue the kinds of core value-driven P2 that we all know about. And so as a result, it's really a kind of a set of norms as well as a kind of it's based on sort of the individual personalities within an organization to decide whether or not they're going to get beyond the 3 minutes at the microphone. And I just think our field sorely needs sort of definitive peer-reviewed research that really looks at whether it be multiple case study or some sort of other comparative analysis that really examines either, money saved or elections won or, lawsuits averted or something that could tangibly show people why it wasn't just a good idea in the moral sense, but a prudent idea in the financial and political sense. So for whatever that's worth.
Thanks, Larry. Sharif, Sherry, and Maria, all three of your mics are open now if any of you wanted to respond to that.
I would just like, this is Sherry, Larry, and I really appreciate your comments about some of the different aspects also in the U.S. system, I realize, and moving along the P2 spectrum, some different considerations, but whether it is providing or establishing research around ROI or how does P2 impact the electoral vote, or as you mentioned, even decrease litigation, there may be some other value propositions to offer into the mix to move along this spectrum that are slightly different than they are in Canada. However, I think the value is in looking at how P2 operates in a number of different environments. So I really look forward to exploring this more in terms of international relations.
So I'm just going to quickly, because we are losing people now. So I want to thank everyone for participating. We're going to keep the lines open for a little bit longer just to see if there's any other questions that people have. But for those of you that have to leave, we really do appreciate you participating. So Sharif or Maria, did you want to respond to Larry's comment?
Yeah, I mean, they're all very valid statements, Larry, and I think that your perspective is shared by many. And certainly we've had discussions along those lines, and it is an area that requires attention. I'm hoping that if we have any researchers or students that were taking part today, that they also heard your comments, because there are a variety of topics that need to be tackled, and I think you hit on some of the main ones. So we've made notes along the way, and today was very valuable for us so that we can go back, and when we're looking at our work this year, fine-tune and carve out the best path. So thank you.
So thank you very much, everybody. For those of you that are still on the line, and there's a few of you, thank you very much for participating. Again, on behalf of IAP2 Canada, IAP2 USA, we really appreciate your participation in the webinar and look forward to welcoming you back to the March webinar. So to Sharif, Maria, and Sherry, thank you. And we'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.